Guys, how about the top 6 passing leaders last year in 2023? I mean, you think of the names at the top of the list. Not a bad list here. Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Jaden Daniels, Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, Caleb Williams as well. All 6 of those guys are transfers, and you got, how many? 2 of those guys going in the top 5. Michael Penix probably going to work his way into the top 32 as well. As of right now, it seems like Michael Penix got a pretty good shot to go in the first round, and then Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel, those 2, certainly no shortage of interest in the transfer portal. And that leads us into our next topic. If you're looking for a quarterback in the transfer portal window and kind of what that looks like as well, right now is a pretty interesting time to do that. Teams in need of help right now at the quarterback position. Carl, I got to admit, this one was pretty interesting. And it doesn't shock me, but it's Missouri. Tell us why.
Well, Brady Cook is the guy at the University of Missouri, so I don't want all the Tiger fans blowing me up, and I don't want Brady blowing me up saying that I don't believe in. Brady Cook is the guy at the University of Missouri and has played great football. They're going to have a special season this year. I would like to see them get a backup transfer quarterback in the portal. Smoke talked about adding depth and roster construction. You want to get, especially in these early non-conference games, you want to get Brady Cook out of the game as soon as possible because you're one injury away from being in a bad position. In some of those games, and if you one injury away, you want to be in a position to still win games if anything happens to your quarterback, and he has been banged up at times. I think that you have to look to get a solid backup quarterback in this transfer portal window if you're Mizzou.
I do believe Drew Pine, who spent some time in Notre Dame and then some time in Arizona State, is committed there. I'm not sure on the current status of.
Yeah, and they also added Daniel Blood, a walk-on transfer, so they're not even using a counter on him, and he started 10 games at Southern last season. But I think Carl brings up an excellent point. Hey, if you're a team that thinks I'm going to contend for one of these 12 spots, look at Florida State last season. What happened after Jordan Travis went down? You know, they rolled some other arms out there. I mean, depth is important at that quarterback position. We'll see if Drew Pine ends up sticking with them. I believe some other schools are still trying to kick the tires, and it doesn't matter in this transfer portal era, right? You're not signing any paperwork. You got to show up to class, and you know, Missouri's going to have to ensure that happens.
All right, speaking of a team with expectations and a team that needs a parachute at the quarterback position, how about Clemson, right? Yeah, Drew, you and I talked about the Clemson quarterback room and kind of what that looks like, maybe projecting out towards the future. Outside of Cade Klubnik, you got a very young, unproven, talented quarterback in Christopher Vizina, but a guy that still has a long ways to go, especially coming off that spring game. Then you got Trent Pierman. If you know, you know. If you watch that Clemson spring game, the former walk-on. Drew, it just seems like this year is kind of mounting up as a big year for Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. How do you feel about that position? Do you feel like they could be a team that could add another arm?
Well, we always talk about this, right? Dabo doesn't want to go in the transfer portal, so I know it's the same story, different show. But look at the Tigers. What happens if Cade Klubnik gets hurt? The Tigers open up against Georgia week 1. We saw that Clemson offensive line in the spring game. They couldn't block those pass rushers. And guess what? Georgia's got a better front 7 right now than I think Clemson does. It's close, but I worry about Cade Klubnik potentially getting injured because it could derail the season. You look at all these teams around the country, that's the one where it's what happens next. And Christopher Vizina, we like him, Cooper. Still cross my fingers here he pans out, but I thought he was. You watch the spring game, couple interceptions, could have been a few more. I'm not sure he's ready to go right now. Cade is the only guy that has started the games there at Clemson. And it's a sneaky good wide receiver room. You got Adam Randall coming back, the two true freshmen. They're fired up about Bryant Wesco. That has me excited about TJ Moore when he arrives on campus, a 5-star for us. I think the Tigers have the top-end talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to contend for an ACC title. But if they go down, if Cade goes down week 1, that's a recipe for disaster.
They seem to be content threading the needle on the high school side. Now, we'll say this, like, you got to give Dabo Swinney and his staff a lot of credit in terms of talent identification and evaluation. They've done a tremendous job there in terms of recruiting the high school level. That being said, Carl, I want to ask you, it becomes very difficult in this new age of transfer portal and roster attrition to be able to stay ahead of the curve, right? It's keeping up with the Joneses, especially when you look around and you see what teams like Florida State have done, teams like Georgia have done. Even as well as they recruit the high school level, this could be a team, at least in my opinion, that could use some fusion of talent from the transfer portal. Just your overall take on that.
Well, they have been elite at recruiting for the last decade, but all the advantages that they had then, they don't have anymore. Not only do you have the transfer portal, you have NIL, and their NIL collective isn't as competitive as a lot of the other schools that they're competing against. So now it might be guys that want to go to Clemson, but then the money becomes a factor. Then when you add in the transfer portal, it gave other teams an opportunity to pass you from a talent standpoint. So they don't have the sizable talent advantage that they used to in a day. There was a day not too long ago where when you played Clemson, they were just going to be better than you. They were going to be able to out-talent you. You could have a bad day from a guy. You can have a bad day from another guy. You could make a coaching mistake or call a bad play, and one of those first-round picks would bail you out. They don't have that talent advantage anymore. It's because of transfer portal. It's also because of NIL, and that's something that they're really going to have to consider looking at moving forward and how they're going to run the program.
Going to be interesting to see what happens with Clemson. Hopefully, Cade Klubnik can stay on the field, and we'll see what happens there with that quarterback room. Smoke, you got an interesting one. USC, Miller Moss coming off a really good bowl game appearance. You got Jaden Maeba coming over from UNLV as well. Just your feel on that situation, and you feel like that quarterback room is good enough for them to compete at a really high level?
Talented room, but again, we hit on it. Who's your backup? Because we are one bad play away from that average offensive line of Miller getting hurt, and you're derailing your entire season going into the Big Ten.
Oh, 12 starts on that roster right now. USC didn't sign a quarterback this past cycle. They're trying to hold on to Julian Lewis in the 2025 cycle. He's a reclass from 2026. I have questions about the long-term outlook on that quarterback room there in LA.
I got to give Lincoln Riley credit, though. Look at the quarterbacks that he's developed. Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray. Maybe he sees something in Miller Moss that everybody else doesn't see. Obviously, he had the big bowl game, but I got to trust Lincoln Riley's vision on his quarterback position because he's done it at the highest level for an extended period of time.
Drew, the pressure kind of mounts on Lincoln Riley going into year 3 after maybe taking a half step back in 2023. What do you expect from them this year?
I think if they think they're a contender, they go out and they get a Jaden Maeba just like that. I mean, there's a ton of transfers that have come in. And, you got Zachariah Branch coming back. I think it could be a fun season. Remember, they're moving into the Big Ten. It's a complete new look.
Not really worried about the offense. Even with Miller Moss, it comes down to the defense. We'll see what happens there. A lot of staff changes as well. All right, guys, we are at the top of the hour. Pretty much a quiet morning as well, but you never know what can happen. Recapping a little bit of that, how about Texas A&M safety Jacoby Matthews enters the transfer portal along with Arkansas running back Isaiah Augustave, right here from Naples, Florida. Texas offensive lineman Peyton Kirkland also entered the transfer portal as well. We talked about him this morning, in addition to Miami edge Nigel Kelly. So a couple of guys been in school for a year or two, already find their way into the portal. Those names will continue to trickle in as well.